My blood ran cold the moment I saw him, the man who had destroyed my life 7 years ago, standing at my daughter's engagement party, charming everyone with that same devastating smile that had fooled me when I was a grieving widow. My champagne glass slipped from my hand, shattering across the marble floor with a sound that echoed my own breaking heart. Every guest turned to look, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could do nothing but stare at this ghost from my past. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I'm Margaret Hartwell, but everyone calls me Maggie. At 65, I thought I knew how to spot predators, men who prey on vulnerable women. I was wrong. There he was, Michael Sterling, standing in my daughter Sarah's pristine living room, surrounded by Chicago's elite. The nightmare I had escaped in 2018 had just walked back into my life. Wearing an expensive suit and that infuriatingly perfect smile, Sarah rushed over, forgetting her wedding dress fitting in her concerned. "Mom, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ghost was exactly right. Michael Reynolds, the man who nearly destroyed me in 2018, was now my daughter's fiancé. Same piercing blue eyes, same calculated charm, same way of working a room that made women forget caution. At 50, he still carried that dangerous appeal that made heart skip and judgment fail. "I'm fine. Sweetheart," I lied, my voice barely steady. I wasn't fine. My mind raced back to Chicago, 2018, when I was 58, only 6 months into widowhood. Robert had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving me adrift in grief. I met Mike Reynolds at a coffee shop near the Grief Counseling Center. He was 42, charming, attentive, with just enough vulnerability to make me feel needed again. For 10 months, he made me feel alive, beautiful, desired, until I discovered he had been slowly draining Robert's life insurance money. "Mom, let me introduce you properly," Sarah said, glowing. "Michael, this is my mother, Margaret Hartwell." Michael stepped forward, and I studied him carefully. Recognition flickered in his blue eyes for a split second, then vanished, replaced by the perfect mask of a man meeting his future mother-in-law for the first time. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, extending a hand with a warm smile. "I've heard so much about you. Sarah talks about you constantly." I forced myself to shake his hand, my skin crawling at the touch. "How lovely. And what business are you in, Mr. Sterling?" I asked. "Investment consulting," he replied smoothly. "I help people make smart decisions with their money." The irony made me want to gag. "Some things never change. How did you two meet?" I asked, keeping my voice artificially bright. Sarah beamed. "At the gym." Michael was so persistent, asking me out for 3 weeks before I finally said yes. Persistent. That was one word for it. I remembered his persistence with me, too, showing up at grief counseling, offering comfort, understanding, patience. As the evening went on, I watched him work the room with practiced ease, remembering names, asking about children, businesses, interests. If I didn't know what he was capable of, I might have been impressed. But I did know, and seeing him charm my daughter's friends and colleagues made my stomach turn. When the party ended and Sarah walked me to my car, she was practically vibrating with happiness. "Isn't he wonderful, Mom? I can't believe how lucky I am. When's the wedding?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "October 15th. I know it's short notice, but we don't want to wait. When you know, right?" October 15th, less than a month away. My heart sank. I had so little time to figure out what Michael really wanted. But I already knew. Sarah's trust fund from her father would mature when she turned 35 in just 18 months. $2.5 million that would make my lost $75,000 look like pocket change. 3 sleepless nights later, I sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m., the weight of what was coming crushing me. With my laptop open, I dove deep into the internet rabbit hole of Michael Sterling's life. What I found chilled me to the bone. Officially, Michael Sterling didn't exist until January 2020. Before that date, there were no social media profiles, no business records, no digital footprint at all. For a successful investment consultant, that was impossible in today's world. Either he'd scrubbed his entire online presence clean, or Michael Sterling was a carefully constructed identity. I'd hired a private investigator on Friday. Patricia Newman came highly recommended and specialized in background checks for worried families. When she called Saturday morning, her voice was grim. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need to meet with you today. This can't wait." We met at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. Patricia, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, spread photos and documents across our corner booth. "Michael Sterling is clean as a whistle," she said. "Too clean. No criminal record, excellent credit, successful business. But here's the problem: every piece of documentation starts in 2020. It's like he was born 5 years ago." She showed me business licenses, tax records, even apartment rental agreements. All of it began in January 2020. I did some digging into similar cases, Patricia continued. This pattern suggests identity theft or witness protection. But witness protection was ruled out through my law enforcement contacts. What about before 2020? I asked, though deep down, I already knew the answer. That's where it gets interesting, she said. I found traces of a Michael Reynolds from Chicago who disappeared in 2018 after being investigated for romance fraud. The case went cold when he vanished. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as my hands shook. What kind of fraud? I managed to ask, targeting widows and divorcees mostly. He'd provide comfort during vulnerable times, gain their trust, then slowly drain their accounts, usually between $50,000 and $100,000 per victim. I closed my eyes, remembering the $75,000 that had disappeared from my life insurance settlement. The money Robert had left to secure my future. The money Mike had convinced me to invest in his business opportunity. There's something else, Patricia said, her voice softer now. I've been tracking similar cases across the country. Phoenix in 2020, Nashville in 2022, Denver in 2023. Always the same pattern: professional women between 28 and 35, quick engagements, sudden disappearances right before the wedding with their money, I whispered. With whatever he could get his hands on. The Nashville woman lost her entire inheritance. The Denver victim had her business accounts cleaned out the day before their wedding. Patricia continued. I stared at Sarah's engagement photo, which I'd brought to show Patricia my beautiful, trusting daughter who had inherited her father's generous heart and would inherit substantial money on her next birthday. What do? I asked helplessly. If I tell Sarah, she'll think I'm a bitter mother who can't accept her happiness. Patricia nodded grimly. That's exactly what he's counting on. These men are experts at isolating their victims from family members who might see through the act. I thought about the past few months, how Sarah had gradually pulled away from me. Canceled dinners, rushed phone calls, always some excuse about being busy with Michael's social obligations. He'd already started turning her against me. It was textbook behavior. But here's the thing, Mrs. Hartwell, Patricia said. You're the first person I've met who actually knew him before. You're the key to stopping him. As I drove home, my mind spun with possibilities. I had to find a way to expose Michael without looking like the jealous ex. I had to protect Sarah without losing her completely. The problem was, I was dealing with a master manipulator who'd had 7 years to perfect his next move, and he had something I didn't. Sarah's complete trust and love, but I had something he didn't know I possessed: the memory of exactly how he betrayed me before, and this time, I wasn't a grieving widow with clouded judgment. This time, I was ready for war. Sunday dinner at Sarah's had always been our tradition, but sitting across from Michael Sterling at her dining room table felt like being trapped in a nightmare. He'd insisted on cooking some elaborate Italian dish that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. This is delicious, honey, Sarah gushed, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Mom, you have to get the recipe. Oh, I doubt I could recreate Michael's magic, I replied with my sweetest smile. I'm sure it requires very expensive ingredients. Michael's laugh was perfectly pitched. Actually, it's quite simple. The secret is taking time to build trust with your ingredients. Let them blend naturally. The double meaning wasn't lost on me. I'd bet he was excellent at building trust with vulnerable ingredients. So, Michael, I said, cutting into my chicken, Sarah mentioned you're from the East Coast originally. Where exactly? Boston, he replied without hesitation. Moved around a lot for work, though. Los Angeles, Phoenix, Nashville. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. He just confirmed Patricia's research without even realizing it. Same cities, same timeline. How interesting. What brought you to Chicago? His eyes met mine across the table. Sometimes life brings you exactly where you need to be, when you need to be there. Sarah looked between us, sensing something in the air but not understanding what. Michael says Chicago feels like home now. Don't you, sweetheart? Especially since I met you, he said, bringing her hand to his lips. And now, meeting your wonderful mother. I wanted to throw my wine glass at his lying face. Instead, I smiled and asked, what about family? Will any of your relatives be coming to the wedding? Unfortunately, no. I'm pretty much on my own in the world. Parents died when I was young. No siblings. His voice carried just the right note of practiced sadness. It was a different story than the one he'd told me 7 years ago, when his parents were supposedly alive but estranged. Some lies evolved with practice. After dinner, Sarah excused herself to take a work call, leaving me alone with Michael for the first time. The mask slipped, just slightly, he said, leaning back in his chair with a wine glass. Sarah's told me so much about her childhood. Growing up with just you after her father died must have been challenging. We managed just fine. I replied carefully, I'm sure you did. She mentioned her trust fund, how it matures next year when she turns 35. There it was. The real reason he was here. Sarah's trust fund worth over $2 million, accessible in just 18 months. Sarah's very fortunate. I said neutrally, she is indeed. And so trusting. Sometimes I worry about that. The world is full of people who might take advantage of someone with such a generous heart. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. He was actually warning me about people like himself while planning to rob my daughter blind. Yes, I agreed. I worry about that, too. Our eyes met across the table, and for a moment, the pretense fell away completely. He was testing me, seeing if I remembered him, and I was letting him know that I did. I'd hate for anyone to come between Sarah and her happiness, he said quietly. She's been through enough disappointment in relationships. The threat was subtle but clear. If I tried to expose him, he'd paint me as the bitter mother who couldn't accept her daughter's happiness. Sarah's voice drifted from the living room as she wrapped up her call. Michael's charming smile returned instantly. I'm so glad we had this chance to talk, Margaret. I have a feeling we're going to get along wonderfully. When Sarah returned, she found us looking like the picture of familial harmony. Are you two bonding? She asked hopefully. Absolutely, Michael said warmly. I was just telling your mother how much I'm looking forward to officially becoming part of the family. As I drove home that night, my hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over twice. Michael Reynolds wasn't just back in my life, he was about to destroy the person I loved most in the world. And this time, he wasn't going to disappear with $75,000. This time, he was going for everything. Monday morning brought the phone call I'd been dreading. Sarah's voice was strained, different somehow. Mom, we need to talk. She arrived at my house an hour later. But instead of coming inside for coffee like she usually did, she stayed standing in my doorway with her arms crossed. Michael told me about your conversation yesterday, she said without preamble. My heart sank. What conversation would that be? Don't play dumb, Mom. The way you interrogated him at dinner, asking all those invasive questions about his family, his past. He said you seemed almost suspicious of him. I kept my voice level. I was just getting to know him better. Isn't that what mothers do? Not like that. You were practically giving him the third degree. Sarah's eyes flashed with anger I'd rarely seen directed at me. And then making comments about expensive ingredients and where he's from. What is wrong with you? This was exactly what Michael had been setting up, driving a wedge between us so that anything I said would sound like jealousy or interference. Sarah. Honey, I'm just concerned because everything is moving so fast. Here we go, she interrupted. I knew you'd say that. You can't stand that I'm happy, can you? That's not true. And you know it, do I? Because ever since I started dating Michael, you've been acting strange. First questioning his job, then his background. Now his intentions. I stared at my daughter, this beautiful, successful attorney I'd raised on my own after Robert died, and realized Michael had been working on her for months, planting seeds of doubt about my motives, making her question my love for her. Sarah, I love you more than anything in this world. Every decision I've ever made has been about protecting you and supporting you. Then why can't you just be happy for me? Her voice broke a little. I've finally found someone who loves me completely, who wants to build a life with me. And instead of celebrating, you're trying to sabotage it. I'm not trying to sabotage anything. I just think you should slow down. That's exactly what Michael said you'd say. She shook her head. He warned me you might have trouble letting go. That some mothers struggle when their daughters find real love. The manipulation was brilliant. Really, Michael had positioned himself as the understanding boyfriend. Who could predict my jealous mother behavior? Making Sarah feel protective of him and suspicious of me. What else did Michael say? I asked quietly. Sarah hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. He said, maybe we should take some space from family drama until after the wedding. Let things calm down. Space? I think it would be better if you didn't come to the wedding, Mom. The words hit me like a physical blow. My own daughter uninviting me to her wedding because a con man had convinced her I was the problem. Sarah, please, let's talk about this rationally. There's nothing to talk about. I've made up my mind. She turned to leave, then looked back with tears in her eyes. I hoped you'd be different, Mom. I hoped you'd want me to be happy after she left. I sat in my kitchen and cried harder than I had since Robert died. Michael had played this perfectly. He'd isolated Sarah from the one person who could expose him. And he'd done it by making her believe she was protecting their love from my interference. But as the tears dried, something else took their place. Anger, pure, white-hot rage at the man who'd stolen from me once and was now stealing my daughter. I picked up my phone and called Patricia Newman. He made his first mistake, I told her. He's trying to keep me away from the wedding. That tells me he's planning something big. Something that requires me not to be there. What do you want to do? I stared out my window at the maple tree Robert had planted when Sarah was born. 32 years of watching over this family. And I wasn't about to stop now. I want to know everything about Michael Reynolds, I said. Every woman he's ever scammed, every lie he's ever told. And then I want to save my daughter whether she wants to be saved or not. Patricia's investigation over the next week revealed a pattern so disturbing I could barely sleep. Michael Reynolds wasn't just a con man. He was a predator who specifically targeted women at their most vulnerable moments. Look at this, Patricia said, spreading photographs across my dining room table. Denver, 2023, Rebecca Morrison, 34, recently divorced. Inherited her grandmother's antique jewelry business. Michael showed up 6 months after her divorce was finalized. The photo showed a lovely blonde woman with kind eyes, standing next to a man I now recognized as my daughter's fiancé. He looked exactly the same as he did now, like he'd found some fountain of youth. Nashville, 2022, Jennifer Walsh, 38. Lost her husband in a motorcycle accident, collected a substantial life insurance payout. Another photo. Another beautiful woman. Same predatory smile on Michael's face. Phoenix, 2020, Catherine Chen, 36. Tech executive who just sold her startup. The pattern was unmistakable. Successful women between 30 and 40, recent life changes. Substantial assets. Just like Sarah Hood, recently made partner at her law firm, and whose trust fund was approaching maturity. What happened to them? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Rebecca lost $180,000. Her business collapsed within 6 months of him disappearing. She's working as a waitress now. Jennifer lost her house, had to move back in with her parents. Catherine, Patricia paused. Catherine had a nervous breakdown. She's still in therapy. I closed my eyes, imagining Sarah's face when she discovered the man she loved had destroyed her life. The betrayal would break something fundamental in her, just like it had been broken in me. 7 years ago, there's something else, Patricia continued. I found records of him using different names. Before Michael Sterling, he was Marcus Sterling, then Mitchell Stone, then Matthew Reynolds. Different initials each time, I observed. Exactly. Makes him harder to track. But here's the interesting part. In every case, he disappeared exactly 1 week before the wedding. 1 week like clockwork. Gets them to consolidate their accounts for wedding expenses. Transfers everything to a joint account for their new life together. Then vanishes the night before the final transfer. I stared at the calendar on my phone. October 15th was 12 days away. We don't have much time, I said. Actually, we do. If he sticks to pattern, he won't make his move until October 8th. That gives us 5 more days to gather evidence. But evidence of what? Even if we proved Michael Sterling was really Michael Reynolds. Sarah was so thoroughly convinced I was the villain that she'd probably think I'd fabricated everything out of spite. I needed to approach this differently, I realized. I needed to make him expose himself. Patricia looked concerned. Mrs. Hart, this man is dangerous. Not physically, maybe, but psychologically. He's had 7 years to plan this revenge, so have I said grimly. He thinks he's dealing with the grieving widow he manipulated in 2018. He has no idea what losing that $75,000 taught me about predators. That afternoon, I drove to Sarah's office building and waited in the parking garage. I knew she usually worked late on Tuesdays, and I was betting Michael didn't know her schedule as well as he pretended to. At 7 p.m., Sarah emerged from the elevator looking tired but happy. She was on her phone, probably with Michael, laughing at something he was saying. When she saw me standing by her car, her expression hardened. Mom, what are you doing here? I wanted to apologize. I said simply, you were right. I was being overprotective and unfair to Michael. Sarah's anger wavered, replaced by cautious hope. You were? I was scared of losing you, I continued, letting genuine emotion into my voice. But watching you these past few months, seeing how happy he makes you, I realized I was being selfish. Mom, I called Michael this afternoon. I lied smoothly. I invited him to lunch tomorrow so I could apologize properly. Clear the air between us. Sarah's face lit up. You did. I want to give him a chance to know the real me, not the suspicious mother. And I want him to know he has my blessing. As I drove home, I knew I was taking a massive risk. If my plan backfired, I'd lose Sarah forever. But if I did nothing, Michael would destroy her life and disappear, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my broken daughter. Either way, tomorrow's lunch with Michael Reynolds was going to be very interesting. I chose the restaurant carefully, upscale enough that Michael would feel comfortable, quiet enough that our conversation wouldn't be overheard, but public enough that he couldn't lose his temper completely when he arrived 5 minutes late. I was already seated at a corner table with my back to the wall. Margaret, he said with that practiced charm, kissing my cheek like we were old friends. Thank you for reaching out. Sarah was so happy when I told her about your call. I owe you an apology, I began, playing the contrite mother perfectly. I realize I came across as hostile Sunday night. It wasn't fair to you. Michael settled into his chair, studying me with those calculating blue eyes. I understand completely. Sarah is lucky to have a mother who cares so much about her welfare. She is my whole world. I said truthfully. After her father died, she became everything to me. Maybe too much. Loss can make us protective, he agreed. But Sarah is a grown woman capable of making her own decisions about love. The waiter came and went, leaving us with wine and small talk about the weather. I waited until Michael seemed relaxed before I made my first move. Can I ask you something personal? I leaned forward conspiratorially. Of course. Have you ever been in love before? For just a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like recognition. Once, he said carefully. Many years ago, but it didn't work out. What happened? I pressed gently. She was older, going through a difficult time. I thought I could help her heal. He shrugged elegantly. Sometimes timing is everything. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression sympathetic. He was talking about me but describing it like a failed romance. Instead of the financial devastation he'd caused, that must have been painful, I said softly. It was. But you know what they say, everything happens for a reason. If that relationship hadn't ended, I might not have been ready to appreciate someone as special as Sarah. I sipped my water, watching him carefully. He seemed genuinely relaxed, almost nostalgic. Either he was an incredible actor or he actually didn't recognize me. I'm sure she was lovely. I said carefully. She was beautiful, intelligent, vulnerable. She'd recently lost her husband and was struggling with grief. How sad. What was her name? Margaret, actually. His eyes met mine with what looked like innocent coincidence. Margaret Thompson, though she went by Maggie. Funny how life works, isn't it? Here I am, about to marry the daughter of another Margaret. The blood drained from my face so quickly I thought I might faint. He knew. He'd known all along who I was, but his expression remained perfectly pleasant, almost fond. Small world, isn't it? I stared at him, my mind racing. When had he figured it out? The engagement party earlier? You remember her? I whispered. Of course I do. I've thought about her often over the years. Wondered what happened to her. Whether she ever found happiness again. He leaned forward slightly. I hope she did. She deserved better than what I gave her. The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. This wasn't the confrontation I'd expected. Where was the threat, the menace, the calculating predator? Why, I breathed. Michael's smile was sad, almost wistful. Because I was young and stupid and thought money mattered more than people. I've regretted it every day since. He signaled the waiter for the check, then looked back at me with what seemed like genuine emotion. If you ever see her again, Margaret, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I became the man she deserved. Too late to matter. As he stood to leave, he placed his hand gently on my shoulder. Thank you for lunch and for giving me a chance. Sarah is lucky to have a mother who loves her so much. As I watched him walk away, I sat in stunned confusion. Either Michael Reynolds was the greatest actor who'd ever lived, or something had fundamentally changed about him in the past 7 years. But as I replayed the conversation in my mind, one thing became crystal clear. He absolutely knew who I was. And for reasons I couldn't understand, he was playing a completely different game than I'd expected. I sat in that restaurant for 20 minutes after Michael left, my mind spinning with confusion. His performance had been flawless, full of remorse and apparent growth. But 7 years of healing from his betrayal had taught me to recognize manipulation in all its forms, even when it came wrapped in apologies. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Mom, Michael said lunch went beautifully. He's so grateful you're giving him a chance. I'm so happy we can all be family. Love you. The manipulation was evolving. Instead of threats, he was using apparent vulnerability and remorse to lower my guard, to make me question my own instincts. I drove straight to Patricia's office. She took one look at my face and knew something had shifted. He's playing a completely different game, I said, and told her everything about lunch. Patricia frowned. The reformed bad boy angle. That's sophisticated. But he definitely knew who you were. Absolutely. The Margaret Thompson reference, the details about my grief, that wasn't coincidence. He's been planning this approach since he identified me. I paced her office. So what's his real endgame? If he's genuinely changed, why target Sarah specifically? Because he hasn't changed. Maggie, men like this don't develop consciences. They develop better strategies. Patricia pulled out a new file. I've been digging deeper into his recent years. Want to know what's interesting? Every one of his victims in the past 5 years has been the daughter or close relative of a previous victim. The blood drained from my face. What? Phoenix 2020. Catherine Chen's victim wasn't random. Her aunt, Linda Chen, was scammed by Michael in Portland. 2019, Nashville, Jennifer Walsh. Her sister Emma Walsh was his victim in Atlanta. 2021, he's been systematically targeting families, Patricia said. It's not about money anymore, Maggie. It's about power, about proving he can destroy entire family lines. I sank into a chair. The full scope of his revenge becoming clear. And Sarah is just the latest branch on my family tree. There's more, Patricia continued. I found records of him researching your life extensively. He knows about Sarah's law practice, her trust fund, her friends, her habits. This isn't opportunistic. It's surgical. Patricia spread out more documents. He's been in Chicago for 8 months. But he waited 6 months to accidentally meet Sarah at the gym. That's planning, not coincidence. I called Jennifer Morrison immediately. I need you to do something dangerous, I told Sarah's best friend. After what you told me about the seduction attempt, I'm in not that kind of dangerous. I need you to research something for me. Quietly, what? I need to know if Michael has contacted any of Sarah's other friends, anyone from law school, college, her social circle. I think he's been mapping her entire life. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Actually, it's weird you mention it. Last month, Sarah said 2 of her college friends had been contacted by some investment guy asking about her. She thought it was strange but didn't think much of it. My heart sank. Did she tell Michael about it? Probably. She tells him everything. After hanging up, I stared at Patricia's evidence board, photos of victims, timelines, financial records. Michael Reynolds had turned revenge into a science. What do we do? I asked. We fight science with science, Patricia said. I've been in touch with an FBI agent, David Chen, Catherine's brother. He's been building a federal case against Michael for years. FBI involvement, cross-state fraud, identity theft, financial crimes exceeding federal thresholds. We have enough to arrest him, but Sarah would never forgive me. She'd think I destroyed her happiness out of spite. I stared out Patricia's window at the Chicago skyline. Then we need to make him expose himself in a way she can't deny. How? I turned back to her, my mind made up. We give him exactly what he wants. My plan was deceptively simple, make Michael think he'd won completely. Then document his real intentions when his guard was down. It required me to become bait, and it was incredibly dangerous. But I'd learned something important from our lunch. Michael's ego was his weakness. He couldn't resist proving how clever he was. Jennifer agreed to help despite the risks. We'd arrange a scenario where Michael thought I was completely defeated and no longer a threat to his plans. This is insane, Maggie, Jennifer said as we sat in her apartment planning. What if he actually goes through with marrying Sarah? He won't. Men like Michael don't commit long-term unless there's a bigger payoff. Once he has access to her trust fund, he'll disappear. And if you're wrong? I didn't answer. I couldn't bear to consider that possibility. The setup was elegant. Jennifer would tell Sarah that I'd had a minor accident, nothing serious, but enough to require a few days of bed rest. This would explain my absence while making me seem harmless and defeated. Meanwhile, Patricia would approach Michael directly, posing as a private investigator hired by a suspicious family member. She'd warn him that someone was investigating his background but had been convinced he was legitimate and was calling off the investigation. The key was making him feel completely secure and touchable. Wednesday evening, Jennifer called Sarah with news of my accident. I waited in Jennifer's guest room, feeling like a fraud for making my daughter worry, but knowing it was necessary. 20 minutes later, Sarah called. Mom, I just heard about your fall. Are you okay? I'm coming over right now. No, sweetheart, I said weakly. I'm fine, just embarrassed. It was so silly tripping over my own feet. But you could have a concussion. The doctor says I just need rest. Maybe this is a sign that I should stop interfering in your happiness and focus on taking care of myself. The words tasted like poison, but they had their intended effect. Oh, Mom. Sarah's voice softened. I never wanted you to get hurt. I just wanted you to trust my choices. I do trust your choices. Michael is wonderful and I was wrong to be suspicious. After we hung up, I felt sick. But within an hour, my phone rang. Michael's number. Margaret, I heard about your accident. Are you all right? I'm fine. Just feeling foolish. These things happen. Listen, I was thinking maybe I could bring you some soup tomorrow. I make a mean chicken noodle and it might be a peace offering, Michael said. That's very kind. But I don't want to impose. It's no imposition. Family takes care of family, right? The word family sent chills down my spine, but I agreed. Tomorrow, Michael Reynolds would come to Jennifer's apartment thinking he was visiting a defeated enemy. Instead, he'd be walking into a carefully constructed trap. But as I lay in Jennifer's guest bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the one being trapped. Michael arrived Thursday afternoon carrying homemade soup and wearing his most charming smile. I was positioned in Jennifer's living room, looking appropriately fragile in my robe and slippers. "You didn't have to do this," I said as he set up the soup in Jennifer's kitchen. "Nonsense. I want us to have a good relationship, Margaret. Sarah's happiness depends on it." He served the soup with theatrical care, then sat across from me with obvious concern. "You know, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Oh, about second chances, about growth." I realized I never properly explained why I'm so grateful Sarah found me. This was at the moment he'd reveal his real motivations. "Thinking I was too defeated to be a threat, I spent a lot of years making mistakes," he continued. "Hurting people I cared about. Women like your namesake, Maggie Thompson. You mentioned her. I did something terrible to her. Took advantage when she was vulnerable. Stole money she couldn't afford to lose." His voice carried perfect remorse. "For years, I told myself she'd be fine, that she was strong enough to recover. I kept my expression neutral, even as my heart pounded, but I found out recently that she never really recovered. Never remarried. Never fully trusted anyone again. I destroyed something fundamental in her." He leaned forward, eyes glistening with apparent emotion. "Do you know what that feels like, Margaret? Knowing you've permanently damaged another human being? I imagine it's quite difficult." I managed. "It is, which is why, when I met Sarah, I saw an opportunity for redemption." "How so?" Michael's mask slipped just slightly, and I caught a glimpse of something cold and calculating beneath the remorse. "By giving Sarah everything I took from her mother: love, security, protection, by making sure she never experiences the kind of betrayal that destroyed Maggie Thompson." The irony was breathtaking. He was describing his plan to destroy my daughter as an act of redemption for destroying me. "That's very noble," I said carefully. "I like to think so. Sarah will never want for anything. Never question whether she's loved. Never worry about her future because I'll take care of everything." "Exactly. Her finances, her decisions, her connections. I'll protect her from every possible source of harm, including me." I realized he wasn't planning to steal Sarah's money and disappear. He was planning something much more sinister: complete control. Turning her into a psychological prisoner while looking like the perfect husband. "She's lucky to have found you," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We're both lucky, though. I have to say, your accident has been a blessing in disguise." "How so?" Michael's smile turned predatory. "It's shown Sarah how fragile family relationships can be. How important it is to hold on to the people who really matter." "I don't follow." "Well, if something were to happen to you, another fall, a health scare, anything really, Sarah would need someone strong to lean on. Someone who could help her through the grief and guide her decisions during such a difficult time." The threat was clear. He wasn't just planning to isolate Sarah from me. He was planning to eliminate me entirely. Make it look like natural causes, maybe another accident, leaving Sarah completely dependent on him. I'd thought I was setting a trap for Michael, but I'd walked directly into his. That evening, after Michael left with promises to check on me tomorrow, I sat in Jennifer's living room with Patricia and FBI agent David Chen, reviewing the recordings we'd captured. "It's not enough," David said grimly. "Talking about taking care of someone isn't the same as confessing to planning their murder." But the threat was clear. I started to. "Yes, but a defense attorney would argue he was expressing concern about your health, especially given your recent accident." Patricia leaned forward. "What about the financial fraud evidence?" "Strong, but circumstantial for this specific case," David said. "He hasn't actually taken any money from Sarah yet." I felt the walls closing in. "So we wait until he destroys her life, or until he makes a more concrete move?" David pulled out a thick file. "There is something else, though. Something I haven't told you yet." He opened the file to reveal surveillance photos of Michael from various cities. "We've been tracking him for 2 years. The family targeting isn't random revenge. It's systematic elimination of witnesses." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Every woman he scammed in the past 5 years has either died in accidents or disappeared completely within 18 months of his initial contact." Patricia went white. "You're saying he's killing his victims?" "We can't prove it yet, but the statistical probability of that many accidental deaths among his victim pool is essentially zero." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I demanded. "Because we needed you to act naturally. If you'd known he was potentially a serial killer, your behavior would have changed." I thought about the soup Michael had brought me, how insistent he'd been that I eat it. "Jesus, the soup, we had it tested," David said quickly. "Clean, but it shows he's probing for opportunities." "What about Sarah? Is she in immediate danger?" "Not yet. His pattern is to secure legal access to their assets first: marriage, joint accounts, power of attorney, then the accidents happen. So, we have until the wedding, we have until the honeymoon," David corrected. "That's when they typically disappear." The room fell silent as the full horror of Michael's plan became clear. He wasn't just going to steal from Sarah and disappear. He was going to marry her, take control of her assets, then kill her, and start the cycle over again with someone else's daughter. What do we do? I whispered. David closed the file. We accelerate the timeline. Force him to make a mistake before the wedding. How? By making him think you're about to expose everything. I stared at him. You want me to confront him directly? With backup. Wired for sound. In a controlled environment. Make him think you've figured out his real plan and are about to tell Sarah everything. That's incredibly dangerous. Yes, it is. But it's the only way to get him to confess to something actionable. I thought about Sarah. About the beautiful life she'd built for herself. About the future Michael intended to steal from her. When? I asked. Tomorrow night. Sarah's at that legal conference until Sunday, right? Perfect timing. As I drove home that night, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I realized I was about to face a man who'd turned murder into an art form. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt ready for him. Because I wasn't the grieving widow he'd manipulated in 2018. I wasn't even the suspicious mother he'd charmed at lunch. I was a woman who'd spent 7 years learning to recognize predators. And tomorrow night, this particular predator was going to discover just how much I'd learned. The confrontation was set for Saturday evening at Michael's apartment. David Chen and his team would be positioned outside, while I wore a wire designed to capture everything Michael said. Remember, David coached me in the van. Your goal is to make him think you know everything and are about to tell Sarah. His ego won't let him be outsmarted by someone he considers inferior. What if he gets violent? He won't. Violence isn't his style. Too messy, too risky. He prefers subtle elimination. I walked up to Michael's building with my heart pounding, knowing this was either going to save my daughter or get me killed. Michael answered the door in casual clothes, looking relaxed and confident. Margaret, what a surprise. How are you feeling? Much better, thank you. Can we talk? Of course. Come in. His apartment was impeccable, sterile, with no personal touches, like a hotel room for someone just passing through. Can I get you something to drink? He offered. No, thank you. Michael, I need to tell you something important. His expression shifted slightly, becoming more alert. What's that? I know who you really are. For just a moment, his mask slipped completely. The charming Fawade disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. Then it snapped back into place. I'm not sure what you mean. 7 years ago, you were Michael Reynolds. You stole $75,000 from me and disappeared. Margaret, I think you might be confused. Catherine Chen, Jennifer Walsh, Rebecca Morrison. Should I continue? His stillness was complete now, like a predator deciding whether to flee or attack. Those are just names to me. They were names to the FBI too, until they started connecting the dots. Did you know Catherine's brother is a federal agent? He's been building a case against you for years. Michael moved to his kitchen casually, opening a drawer. I couldn't see what he was reaching for, but I kept talking. Here's what I find fascinating. I continued. You told me yesterday about wanting to redeem yourself by protecting Sarah from the kind of betrayal you inflicted on me. Very poetic. I meant every word. I'm sure you did. But we both know protection isn't what you have in mind. What do you think I have in mind? Margaret, this was at the moment that would either expose him or end my life. I think you're going to marry my daughter, gain control of her assets, then arrange a tragic accident during your honeymoon, just like you've done with every other woman who trusted you. Michael's hand stopped moving in the drawer. When he turned back to face me, the mask was gone completely. Prove it, he said quietly. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to tell Sarah the truth about who you really are, and you think she'll believe you? Her bitter, paranoid mother who's been trying to sabotage her happiness from day one? She'll believe the FBI. They have evidence connecting you to 6 murders across 4 states. No, Michael said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. They have suspicious deaths and convenient coincidences. No evidence. Then you have nothing to worry about, do you? He studied me for a long moment, then smiled that devastating smile that had fooled so many women. You know what the beautiful thing is, Margaret? Even if you tell Sarah everything, even if she believes you, it won't matter. Why not? Because she's already signed the paperwork transferring her trust fund to a joint account. As her fiancé, I have legal access to everything. My blood ran cold. What paperwork? The premarital financial planning documents. She was so touched that I wanted to ensure our financial security together. His smile widened. $2.7 million accessible Monday morning. She would. And she did, because she loves me completely and trusts me with her future. The FBI team chose that moment to burst through the door. Michael barely flinched as they surrounded him, weapons drawn. Michael Reynolds, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. As they cuffed him, Michael looked back at me one last time. You were too late, Maggie. By the time Sarah discovers what I've taken, I'll be untouchable, but he was wrong. Because while he'd been planning his perfect crime, Sarah had been planning something too. Actually, came a voice from the doorway. You were the one who was too late. Sarah stepped into the apartment flanked by 2 more FBI agents. Her face was cold with fury, but her voice was steady. I never signed any financial documents. Michael, the papers you had me sign were fake props provided by the FBI. My trust fund is exactly where it's always been. Michael's confidence cracked completely. That's impossible. What's impossible, Sarah said, is that you thought I wouldn't notice my own mother conducting a surveillance operation? Did you really think I didn't know she was staying at Jennifer's? That I wouldn't figure out why? She looked at me with tears in her eyes but steel in her voice. I've known something was wrong for weeks. I just needed proof. 2 years later, the man we'd known as Michael Reynolds was sentenced to life in prison for 6 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of federal fraud. His real name was Marcus Webb, and his victim stretched back nearly 15 years. Sarah returned to her life stronger and more cautious. Having learned that love without verification is just vulnerability, she eventually met someone worthy of her trust. But she never made another financial decision without asking my opinion first. And me? I learned that sometimes the best way to protect the people you love isn't to shield them from the truth. It's to trust them to handle it when the time is right. Some battles require a mother's fierce protection, but some require teaching your child to fight alongside you. Either way, family wins in the end. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.